Hey, first of all, I wanted to tell you, I just recently started. I got my library card back, so I started Hoopla again.
Yay.
So I've been reading Tom King's run on Batman.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What do you think of it? I haven't done that one.
I like it way better than his Mr. Miracle.
Really?
Yeah, I like it a lot.
Okay, I'll have to check it out. It's better than Scott Snyder's stuff. Scott Snyder's was really up and down, though. I thought.
Well, right now it is, but I just started. I thought it's pretty on par with it. But the good news is on Hoopla, it's got the deluxe edition, so it's like 2 trade paperbacks each instead of using all your one.
Usually 7.
But I guess I get
the cheapest comic fans ever.
Well, we're going to talk about it. In fact, we might as well start with that. Hey, it's the return, the long-awaited return of the Bender and Jeremy show, are affectionately known as PC Bombcast presents the Pop Culture Comic Pod.
Hello.
It's the first time we've done it in a while, and it's the first out of the last 3 comic pods that the flop hasn't been on.
Yeah, she's going to come down and try beer, apparently.
Yeah, but not have any comic book talk whatsoever.
Why are we trying all these different beers?
Well, you just got through telling a story that will not make the episode, probably make an outtake episode. Yeah. But you stopped at the beer sauce shop on 318 Mid River.
It was a long-winded story, I'll give him that.
Yeah, it was. Well, and it was interrupted by your bad pronunciation of Cigar City beers. But you
spell it the way it looks.
You still were messing up because there's no extra J in there. Yeah. But you were like, combining a beer, a sport with a Jai, the football player. That's what you're doing. Yeah. But anyway, you stopped in there on the way here.
Yep.
And you were just going to get a couple beers to kill time when Andrew said, hey, let me sponsor the episode. So
thanks, Andrew.
Of course, the Beer Sauce Shop is always a sponsor of the show. I will tag them in this. So this episode brought to you by the Beer Sauce Shop. Like I said just a while ago, 318 Mid River Mall Drive, now serving great sandwiches.
Yep. I didn't get to try one of those. I should have.
I've had about 3 or 4 of them
really?
at a time. Yeah, I love it. And the nachos. Missy loves the nachos.
I need to get in there on like a Saturday morning.
We should probably just go there on 11 o'clock on a Saturday one day and just do it. Damn. We'll even invite Tom.
We'll invite Tom. No wives, though.
He came back to an episode 1.
He did.
But that's not why we're here today. We are here to drink the beer and talk about the Beer Sauce Shop, who sponsored this episode. But what we're here to talk about is the comic book industry, or at least sort of giving our take. We're not going to dive like specifics, like hardcore numbers, which we've done in the past, and we promise we'll get back to a year in review episode because those seem to be some of our favorites.
It is.
The favorites of fans.
I wish somebody would ask us like what year they want us to do.
Yeah, tell us what year it is. People out there, Jay with the Nerdcast does a real good job of putting us out on Reddit, on the comic book forums and whatnot. Tell us what year you would like us to review, and we'll review it. This one's kind of a sequel to your reviewed. This is going to be we're going to talk about Diamond Comics a little bit in this because I believe Diamond Comics probably have a little bit to do with what we're going to talk about. And what spurred this topic, what was the genesis of this topic, was a few days ago or last week, everybody's favorite no-feet drawing punching bag, Rob Liefeld, recently went on a string of diuretic tweets.
Yeah, it was a mess.
It was a mess, and I've got them queued up here, and we're not going to jump like I was going to do like a career retrospective of Rob Liefeld, and then I realized I don't like him that much.
And we have better things to do with our time.
Yeah, so what we did do, though, is so Rob Liefeld recently quit Twitter, but here's what he did before he left Twitter. It was a couple of weeks, or last Tuesday, exactly, as you listen to this, a week ago, or almost a full 8 days ago.
Okay.
DC Comics.
Week and a day.
Yeah. He tweeted, DC Comics going to drive off a cliff here real soon. Got to get my popcorn. He followed it up with, ain't never seen a company in as much disarray as DC Comics. Thank God they have Batman to act as their Tylenol, aspirin, laughing gas. More Batman will fix it. Emoji, smiling emoji.
That one I kind of agreed with.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's and we're going to talk about X-Men a little bit too, but it used to be the Marvel theory.
Yeah.
Put Wolverine on the cover, it'll sell.
Exactly.
And then people in here, this Jeff Monk said, what would you know about good? Have you ever even done anything that's good? Not sales-wise, I mean, actually good. I can't think of anything. You're the KFC of comics. Not very good, not something many will admit to liking, but strangely still around. And he put this fool. He also... he goes, again, this is symptomatic of so many lame takes. DC competitor. No, I'm a DC fan. I own more DC comics than you can imagine. So unless I accept status quo like a lemming, I'm competing. So lame. of all things, too, Mark Miller came to the defense. Mark Miller actually came out and he said, I've got it right here. Let me get down to it, which you got to love Mark Miller, but
Yeah.
Mark Miller, well, I don't have it on this one, but Mark Miller came out and essentially said, you don't think they have the strong, stable characters they've had in a while, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, is there something on the horizon? And to which Rob Liefeld responded, you must be thinking of the 80s again, Mark. So he's arguing against this. This is not the first time. I just want to run down some of the things that he's been in trouble for in the past. He had said he ranted about quitting DC after New 52, implying that his editor had a small penis. He insulted the entire roster of DC creators who were unable to pull off an upcoming DC Rebirth launch, he said. He said everyone who worked with him on Deadpool besides him has been a D-lister. He said in the 90s, basically, if you got to work with him, you hit the Liefeld lottery. He said Mike Mignola and Mark Silvestri, speaking of no feet, were actually the pioneers of no feet drawing. And he just gets a lot of crap for it. He said Fabian Nacenzia, he said he could have created Deadpool with a janitor as easy as he could have with Fabian.
What a fucking asshole.
Yeah, he's got some issues, man. He's always been a bit of a I've got it queued up so we can watch it when we're done because I really want you to watch the Levi 501s, directed by the commercials.
Yeah,
it was a series of commercials in '91.
Yeah, we talked about this last week.
Directed by Spike Lee, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
And he's in one of them, so I'll have to show you that. And even in that, now when I was a kid, I'm not gonna pretend I did not love Rob Liefeld in '91.
Oh, yeah.
I did. And I thought that commercial was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. But watching it now, he oozes dick face in that commercial, too.
I mean, he does have great character. Like, Deadpool's a fan favorite character. Cable is a...
By the way, he came up with the look, which is arguably Deadpool's look is up there with, not Spider-Man, but it's pretty iconic.
Yeah, that's really iconic.
That logo, that face is a great, arguably one of their better ones.
Yeah. It's never really changed. I don't think Cable's has changed much either.
But he's never wrote the good stuff.
No.
So he can't go Stan Lee's argument on how
he's an architect.
He creates a skeleton and lets other people flesh it.
Yeah, build it out.
Here's the problem with hating him though. There's no way around it. Anytime Rob Liefeld comes back to one of the big two, DC, Marvel, and does something.
It's big.
Goes through the roof. The sales go through the roof.
Well, I wonder what this... Because doesn't he has a new X-Men character, like Agent X or something like that?
Yeah, he's talking about that.
I wonder how well that character's going to do...
In light of this?
In light of the other stuff upcoming.
Probably pretty good.
Well, in light of this, and then also Hickman taking over and basically restarting that,
and
which we'll get into, I guess.
Whether or not his character's going to survive the Hickman
I don't know,
thing. Jonathan Hickman, by the way, fantastic writer.
Oh, yeah, spectacular.
Well... hit or miss. Sometimes he does some of the most amazing stuff,
and then other times it
like feels like a copy of the stuff he did before.
Yeah, and then sometimes I'm like, are you? Yeah, when he gets like too meta into his own thing, I'm like, am I too dumb to understand this, or are you just
the answer's probably yes.
Spin wheels?
Probably yes on the both. But no, I'm well, I get that too. But I literally some of his runs, especially on that Avenger stuff.
Yeah. Which I'm rereading it now, and it's really good.
It is good, but I've read some of his stuff, and there's issues where I go, I feel like I read this issue, and then I'll kind of think about it. And, it feels exactly paced and wordage and thematically to some of his other stuff.
No, I agree.
Now, that said, he's still a great writer. Still a way better writer than Rob Liefeld ever has been.
Yeah. His East to West stuff is spectacular.
But that does, East to West is awesome.
Yeah.
But that does bring up a point, and that's where I told you we wanted to go with this episode. The industry is so drastically different, and there is things going on in the industry that aren't great. One of them is the way the direct market comic goes through Diamond goes to market. There's been, I think they estimated that there's 10% less comic book stores in the country than there were 5 years ago. Yeah. Sadly, one of those is
Comic Cave.
The Comic Cave is he just announced 60% off sale today.
I saw that.
And that's gonna. I mean, he's effectively at death's door, and that's not disrespect. He's one of my most beloved friends, and I love everything that Josh does with comics. And the fact that a great comic book man like Josh, and he simply cited with him. You can cite. I believe don't hold me to the hard numbers, but I think it was almost like at one point $10,000 worth of subscriber stuff.
Yeah,
and that's not him over ordering, or that's people that said
pulls
that,
list.
yeah.
Pull lists.
And part of the problem is if someone does cancel their subscription, there's a good chance that you have 2, sometimes even 3 months ahead of orders for those people.
Yeah.
Because it's just simply put, Diamond Comics makes you buy comics before you even know if the story's going to be worth buying or not.
They're a big business.
They're a monopoly.
Yeah.
It's a weird one, and the reason they can get away with not being a monopoly because there is still newsstand comics. There's still book. There's there are ways around it, but it is a. I said this was a little bit of a sequel because we did the year that their competitor, Heroes, what was it? Yeah, I can't remember the name off the top of my head now, but they folded up, and Diamond became the only game in town, and which almost crippled Marvel. So actually, somebody told Liefeld, like, didn't Marvel fold in the 90s and or file for bankruptcy? And he was right. He said, well, what's that got to do with anything?
Yeah.
But it did happen, and it happened because the distribution thing they tried to start, and there were 3 at one point, and then Diamond was the only survivor. But it's a weird to start with on whether or not the comic book industry is folding or declining or however you want to look at it, because we're going to look at it from a couple angles. But if you want to say that it is declining in sales, that is true.
Yeah. I would say individual issue sales are really folding. I would say trades are probably up more. I'm guilty of buying trades as opposed to individual.
And I was gonna ask you.
Issues.
We were gonna talk about the ways we consume. You and I consume our comics, and we're just 2 guys.
Yeah.
I mean, we are not the comic book. I did, for those that don't know, don't listen. I did own a comic book store, and I worked for a successful chain that is even more successful now that they gravitated away from being what they considered a comic book store, and they turned themselves into a kind of a pop culture store.
Yeah, is Slackers nationwide?
No, Slackers is St. Louis only.
Is it?
Metro
Okay.
area only.
What about
V-Stock is who we're talking about that I used to
V-Stock.
work. That is what I used to
is
work.
that nationwide?
Ish. They're
Okay.
Midwest into Dallas now.
So basically, like old school CDs, like.
But they changed to that.
albums.
Vinyl became a big
Vinyl,
deal.
yeah.
They're very adaptive, and they realized their original store, Bookbinder in Joplin, Missouri, people did view as a comic book store. Well, it's not really a comic book store anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, they do comic books, and they do them okay.
Yeah.
But guys like Jason Hurley, a friend of our show, and has a successful comic book store in Joplin, Hurley's Heroes.
Yeah.
But again, he's also got other things in the fire. I.e., he writes beauty for Image and some other.
Yeah.
He adapted some
Beauty's
like Splatoon from the Japanese adaptation of the comic book Splatoon. He adapted it into English for, I believe, is Image or Dark Horse? I can't remember. But so he subsidizes his income with, not to demean either one, but a legitimate career as an author.
And then there's also like in St. Louis, there's Apotheos Comics, which they have
They're new.
They're new, and their online presence is spectacular. Their social media is really, really well done. They do things on like Friday nights with like new music. Like if you want to be if you're an up and coming artist, or they do open mic nights on Friday. They have game nights. They have just meet other nerds around the downtown
they
area.
also serve beer.
And they serve beer.
And that's the thing too. They are what they are is a bar, a small bar that happens to also be a good-sized comic book shop.
I've been in there, and I would disagree. That's what I thought based
The
on
way
their
they
social
market
media.
it.
Yeah, the way they market it. But then you go in there, and they're not. They are a comic book shop first that has
Yeah.
a cooler full of beer that you are more than welcome to buy. And
That's
fine.
You know what they are a lot like? They're a lot like Nerd Melt Comics in California that had Nerd Melt Theater underneath, which
Yeah.
is where a lot of comic book comedians used to do
Yeah.
their shows and stuff.
Exactly, yeah.
And they're not to that size per se, but they are definitely, they see that, I mean, they're cool enough in the shop. The owner we've talked to, we would love to go do a show there at some point.
Yeah, I would love to.
They are, and I'd love to have them talk on stuff like this. In fact, maybe we'll do a follow-up episode and have them and stuff. Maybe we'll even get to talk
real
to
industry
Josh.
professionals.
Yeah, well, I was at one time.
Yeah, I know, but
And
you've been out of the game a
A
little while.
long time. In fact, the game's changed. You did reference something, though, a while ago. Well, they survive, I think, or could survive. And I'm not even, this is not me talking crap on them. They're surviving now. They're new. They're still that new car smell. They're doing great. They've really got a lot of momentum.
Well, like that Star Comics or Star Clipper.
It was around for a long time. Well, it's on Washington now.
Is it? Oh, they're still around?
They closed. Somebody bought it and moved it.
Okay. But so
It's second.
that means somebody else is trying to keep it alive.
Yeah, and
but they were strictly a comic book shop.
Yeah, and then there's I can't think of the name of it. We'll have to look, but on the Loop there is in fact another comic book store on there now, and it's it's a pretty good one. They also do they do gaming and also
see that was going to be my follow-up question is like, what is that? And it's like, because the last comic book shop that I used to go to also did a lot of gaming, and that part I didn't like because there was always these gamers in there who. There's a different set of elitists, but I don't really want to talk to you about your fucking game. I'm here to buy the Batman or Spider-Man.
Yeah, yeah, you're a different kind of nerd. You don't want to be. You don't want to. Well, so the Magic the Gathering is as strong as it's been in forever.
They got Netflix got a series coming out.
Pokemon cards are never going away. And Dungeons and Dragons is in the middle of a big, massive resurgence in its lifespan too. So gaming, those two go hand in hand.
And I agree. And when you're in an industry like this that is, can easily be supplemented by the internet, you have to find your niche market with like gaming nights and stuff like that bring that stuff in.
But to close up on Apotheos is they are going good right now. Josh was on fire. Playboy magazine, their online article called him one of the 10 best comic book stores in the country. 5 years ago. He's going away.
That sucks.
They could go away. We don't know.
I hope not.
I hope not too. And there's some people
We'll have to put their address down there in case anybody down there listens and wants to swing by and pick something up.
And
support a local business.
Comic Relief is a store that's around here, and I believe they're still going. And
yes, Comic Relief is still going.
He used to have a lot more locations, so he's kind of drawn back a little too.
Yeah, he's still got the one right there off of 94.
Yeah, and I believe he had 3 at one point.
See, I didn't know that. I'm guilty of that, and I feel terrible about it now. But when I was doing pool lists and I pulled back because of having kids and financial situations, I stopped showing up. I didn't call and tell them, hey, I'm done. And I feel like an
Even good people do it. Even good people do it.
Like thinking about it, I'm like, he's a small business. I should have called and said, hey, man, cancel my subscription. I'll pay for what I got. And I didn't.
I think here in the Metro, Newcastle's still going. And that guy he's a nice guy. He even attempted to do a couple of conventions. I don't know if he still is involved in the conventions that go on up here, but he seemed like a nice guy, too. I enjoyed his shop. Reasonably priced, good key issues. But regardless, you also brought up a point about trade paperbacks, and that's one way people are gravitating to, and the numbers back it up. I think it was in 2012 they were responsible for $850 million in sales. Or no, it was more less than that. It was like 600 something, and then in 2017 it was $850 million.
Yeah.
So they're growing sales in trade paperback, and that's why. And it's being more adopted by the bigger places like Barnes and Noble and Amazon and. Even your local library gets a lot of trade paperbacks in, and which, is it also not just the way we do? For those that don't know, you and I typically, for the most part, with the addition of buying a handful of stuff, we use Hoopla.
I use Hoopla, and I have an Amazon Kindle subscription unlimited, so I read a lot of stuff through that, and a Marvel Unlimited subscription that I've read a lot of stuff through that.
Well, that's another thing too. DC has a new app, and DC just announced its entire library is available. It's going to be on it,
and that's worth checking out. I'm less of a DC fan than you are per se, but it'd still be
I'm just a fan of comic books.
Yeah, but Marvel draws me in more so like. And right or wrong, you can agree or disagree with me, but I tend to lean towards the Marvel side of things. But I would, if they had a free 30-day trial, I would jump on and check some stuff out and then see if I want to keep going with it. But I think I blame the trade paperback craze, and the reason that I enjoy reading them is I blame it on instant gratification from things like Netflix and Hulu.
Well,
and
that started before those got big. And matter of fact.
But I mean,
those may be a product of things like trade paperback, but you're right. There is that correlation.
Instant gratification.
You get a complete story at a cheaper price.
Exactly, and even if the story's going to continue, which it probably generally does, you could wrap it up tidily and say okay, I was kind of.
Did you just say tidily?
Yeah.
Okay. Tidily? We'll just go with it. Yeah. No, I don't think either of that. Tidy. I think so. What you're looking for. Yeah.
Tidy, and a nice tidy story that was wrapped up.
Nice pretty bow.
Yeah, and you're like, okay, that was good enough for me. And move on to something else.
Or even if you buy a book just on a flyer, you spend $10 to $20 maybe at the most.
Yep.
and you're out $20. Where if you track down some, and everybody said it was great, maybe it's not great.
Yeah.
Instead of tracking down the single issues, where you may spend a total on that same 6 to 12 issues, 4 to 5. Hell, Marvel's got some price tags of $7 now.
Yeah, I think the last one I tracked down, it was the last one I ordered was Mr. Miracle, the Tom King run. It was 12 issues. I think I paid $15 for it. It was an Eisner Award-winning comic.
And I read it on Hoopla.
And I thought it was really good, but I didn't love it as much
wasn't my favorite.
Other people did.
Yeah, it wasn't my favorite. I deserve it as of the hype or not, whatever. It was okay.
Yeah, and I enjoyed it, but I'm not mad spending $15 on it, but was I spending $4 a comic on it every month, I might have dropped out, after 4 or 5 issues.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think I would have stuck through the whole thing.
No, that would have been a tough one for me. Like I said, there were parts of it I'm glad I did, because there were parts that were great. But again, had you tracked down those issues, got a little bit of heat to them. So if you could have got them at cover price, you'd been out like $60. If you'd have got, that's if the first one might have been like a $5 book because it was popular.
And I'm not a collector of things. I've never.
No, but that's what I mean. Your option is that or the trade paperback or the digital.
See, I'd rather have the trade paper. I like the trade paperback. I like having it. I like being able to pick it up.
I love the hardcover, and there's a certain amount of collectability to that.
And then, so like right now, I'm reading my Black Hammer. Thank you.
Oh, Black Hammer, yeah.
I'm reading all of that right now. At least everything I can get.
I read the first 12. I read the first 12 on Hoopla.
The third volume just came out.
Yeah, I need to read that.
The spin-offs are out too. But that is one so far.
That's where they're in a world and they don't know how they're there.
They're trapped on a farm, in a small town, and they can't figure out how to. In volume 3, they kind of start figuring it out. And
they can't leave it. Okay, yeah.
And it's getting really good.
Yeah, that was a good book.
And it is. And the world that let me give credit to the artist because his name just Jeff Lemire built is spectacular, and that is something that I would buy in a collected edition. Something that like Hellboy, Mike Magnolia's Hellboy, all volumes of that I buy in collected editions.
Now, who wrote that? Who's the artist versus who's the writer?
Jeff Lemire wrote it.
Okay, you said his art. You credited him with art. So.
I didn't. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say art. It's Dean Orsma and Dave Stewart are the art in.
Well, it's hard to say the way they write it down there.
It's really hard.
But that's the creative team on it. So
Northlanders is on here? I never read Northlanders.
Yeah, I read that. That's not bad.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. That's the best thing about Hoopla is like you click in and you get one.
And what it's also great about Hoopla too is a couple nights ago I wanted to know I was like again there's also the other weird thing that's going on, and we can make an argument one way or the other that let's say the quality of the books is that in decline, and we're going to get to that in a second. But you brought up Scott Snyder's run on Batman earlier, which was considered a legendary run. It was Court of Owls was unbelievable.
Yeah.
Court of Owls, let me give it enunciate on it. And it was followed up by Tom King's run, which has gotten a lot of praise. Well, something happened there, and he's being booted off early. But it turns out he's going to go start another book.
He's doing like Mr. Miracle and Big Barda, and
he's doing another Batman book. It's
is he?
Batgirl I can't remember, or Batman and Catwoman or something like that.
Oh yeah, because they got married but didn't get married. I didn't.
You got to read his book, his run. Yeah, she killed 227 people. Again, read it to find out what really happened there.
That's kind of a deal breaker.
It's a good story.
Yeah,
it's a good story,
He's a good Twitter follow, by the way.
So with Hoopla, I was like, I couldn't put it together because if you just look up Batman, you can get a shit ton of titles. So I was like, you know what? Let me just look up Tom King, and you got everything he wrote that's available through St. Charles Public Library.
Same thing, yeah. They don't always have everything, which is kind of annoying, but like you can request it.
They have enough.
They have enough. Similar thing with Hickman. I was reading about Hickman taking over the X-Men now, so I dove back in. And I was like, I've read all of his East to West stuff, but I'm like, what else has he done for Marvel? And I'd forgotten that he had read Avengers around the time that I was picking up issues on a monthly basis. And then I fell off, and I never really finished any of those arcs. So I'm going back, and I'm reading some of those now.
So when the comic book industry in the 90s was massive, when it was as big as it's ever been, before the bubble burst and before collectors come in and tried to and essentially crippled it, one of the things that was leading the charge was Marvel's X-Men. Mm-hmm. X-Men have been gone a while. essentially, because of the Sony or the Fox, and then now they're back with. But for whatever reason, there was a strong attempt by Marvel a few years ago to maybe write X-Men completely off of the comic industry.
And that was Marvel and Fox. I would credit that. But have you tried to read anything X-Men wise?
Well, yeah, and then the quality of X-Men, and some might argue the quality was outside of Chris Claremont's run, and then there was a great Joss Whedon run and some things like that.
Then after
even Warren Ellis had a great run.
Yeah, but then after that, it's just so. The last good books I read were X-Force by Rick Remender. And that was a solid, self-contained story. But what I hate about the X-Men is you have to pick up 7 books to understand the full story.
For the most part, yeah. And that was one thing that in the 90s they did well. Is there was X-Men Blue Team, X-Men Gold Team, which was Uncanny
which
versus
they tried
X-Men.
to do this past year with X-Men Blue and Red.
And it didn't work.
Blue didn't work. Red was really good story writing. I forget who wrote Red. I don't know if it was Jason Aaron or not. I can look it up. But,
super good writer.
Southern
Bastards, didn't he do that? I like that.
He did Southern Bastards, and he's done all of the Thor stuff.
Which is your favorite run of Thor's. It's his run.
And the first volume of the Omnibus just came out, so I got to get that.
It's on Hoopla now too, I think.
No, I want to own it.
Yeah, I
want to own the whole.
Well, there you go. That's good. But it also doesn't save the comic industry, which is kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I know, but
still.
But I know.
My question about the X-Men though was, with Hickman redoing it, and it's not the first time they've been relaunched, but now that they're back under the Marvel fold, is Avengers so big now that the X-Men days are they gone, or is it Days of Future Past, or is it coming back?
No. I don't think I think the X-Men are due for a big on-screen.
Can Wolverine be as successful now as he was in the 90s?
Yes, but I disagree. Let me rephrase it.
Keanu plays him.
Yeah, Keanu, he's too tall, man.
I know. Well, so was Hugh
Jackman,
yeah.
But they just made him look short.
He was huge Jackman.
They can. But I think they need to embrace, or maybe could embrace, the Old Man Logan story, which I thought was a spectacular movie.
Well, they tried that, too. Logan was a good movie.
But I read the all-new Wolverine stuff, which was written by Tom Taylor, which was Mr. Miracle, not Tom King.
Oh, okay.
I always confuse those two. But Tom Taylor wrote all-new Wolverine, which is... the female Wolverine is Clone X-23.
Oh yeah.
I read most of it. The Hoopla doesn't have the last volume out there, but it's a solid comic book, self-contained X-Men run.
And sorry, as big as that could be, as good as it is, she's not Wolverine.
No, she's not. And you're right. And it's called All New Wolverine, and she gets her own little mini clone, and Old Man Logan comes in, and it's fun. And her clone is called Honey Badger, and it's fucking adorable and hilarious.
That's funny.
That's
funny.
Yeah, there's fun stuff like that, but it's a good self-contained story. But she's not Wolverine.
Yeah.
They could take Wolverine out for a while, replace her with this, and then bring Wolverine back
and
later.
Make big sales, maybe. Another thing too with the X-Men, a lot of people forget, I believe. Young people may. It was the X-Men that really started this current boom of comic book movies.
Absolutely.
Then Spider-Man, and then Christopher Nolan's Batman, and then Marvel really with Iron Man. Yeah, and that's when it really blew up.
Okay.
I can tell you for a fact, as a guy that owned a comic book store when Iron Man came out, it spikes very shortly.
Yeah.
But the long-term sustainability or the long-term effect that a big movie has, well, I don't even want to go so far as say long-term, it's got more to do with the back issues, the origins of the characters, the original.
You want to go back and read that trade?
Well, no, I mean in the collectors or the people searching for them. And then that's even a falsehood. I can tell you this: my old partner, we had a customer that come in and was a big key collector, and when that movie came out, he brought his Iron Man in, and he's like, Iron Man #1. He's like, what would you sell this for? And I looked at it. I opened up Overstreet, which has always been before the interwebs was considered the guide Bible, and it's still a damn good way to judge what the comic's worth. I looked it up, and the condition he had it in, it was about a $3,700 book according to Overstreet. I said, well, in your book that's worth this, I would probably price it to sell at $2,500. And him and my partner both like, oh, you're crazy. This same book in this condition is going for $5,000 to $6,000 on eBay. I said, well, go sell it on eBay. And he said, no, I want to keep it. I go, well, then it's not worth anything. It's not worth anything if you want to keep it.
Do you just want a justification of your price? Is that what you want?
And my partner and I would have countless arguments about this. He goes, you got to price these books to sell. You got to look at eBay. And I go, no, you have a price to sell in the store. Yeah. And if you buy it right, you can sell it for whatever you want. If I buy that same book from someone, $800 cash, and he's like, well, how could you make that happen? Or even $1,000. He's like, well, that won't happen. I'm going, $1,000 looks like a lot of money to a lot of people. But we typically, on monster key books, you didn't want to buy it for more than half of what you were selling it at.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for the average book, you didn't want to buy it for more than a third of what you were going to sell it at because you have to. It's an investment for your store.
You got to make a profit. It's going to sit there. It's going to.
And every day it's there, it devalues your profit.
Yeah.
It takes up space in your store. It devalues. But there would be this little bit of spike on the internet for these origin issues. But even then, those plateau, and they don't come back down for books like that. For Walking Dead #1's never going to come down.
Yeah.
But it may. Walking Dead may be the anomaly. The show may go off the air or hit the shitter, and people just don't get as interested anymore.
Yeah.
But the first edition of Spider-Man, or first appearance of Spider-Man and Amazing Fantasy.
Because it's iconic. There's so many.
It's never going anywhere.
No.
And it's, but that's the movies, though. The desired effect, in theory, when it happened, was everybody's like, "Oh, these movies are going to drive people back to the comic book stores," but they don't.
But that's again, like, and your point is, people might go back, but nobody's going back to read Spider-Man 1 from 1960, whatever.
Yeah, unless it's a trade.
It's a trade, and even then, it's so hard to get through that stuff nowadays.
Well, my point there is where those movies actually spiked. They spiked the older books, not the current books.
I think I would disagree, and I would think that they would spike an interest in like the new characters and the new writing on what's going on now because it's more relatable as opposed to.
And maybe that's why you see the trade paperback effect, but it's not doing it to the monthly book.
Yeah,
those are falling.
I would agree with that.
The problem in the comic book industry is, and always has been, and they've tried many different ways to address this, is getting young readers involved in comics. That gets harder and harder the more video games, the more things like that come out.
It also gets easier and easier with the access of apps and stuff. I do, like, as much as you hate to admit it, and as much as you and I love a brick and mortar comic book store to go to, we still, through our own confession here, don't do it that often.
Takes up a lot. Those apps take up a lot less space in your house.
Yeah,
get your wife off your back.
Get it all done. I read 6 or 7 comic books at a time now, and it's just it's nice. It's convenient. If I don't like it, I just bounce on to the next one. Like whatever. No real time investment, no real cost investment from it. Short of the subscription fee that I'm paying for the app, but there's 10,000 other things to read in that $10 a month that I'm paying for that, so it's worth it to me. Like it's the cost loss, the risk value or risk reward is so much higher in an app-based application versus just buying one issue and waiting a month to see if it pans out. And that's the problem. I think the comic book industry and the comic book brick and mortar store, as much as we like them and enjoy them, you're going to get your niches that are like Apotheos right now, or the guys who do the magic stuff that are going to be there. But as a whole, most of the industry is probably going to go away, and that's unfortunate. But what are you going to do?
Yeah,
Amazon is what it is. I
can
get a whole trade tomorrow.
I could buy a hardcover at 40% of its price on Amazon when it's brand new. One of the other things, and we talked about the direct market. You brought up with the X-Men how when they relaunched it, you had to read 7 books in order to get one story. That's the other thing too. Since this started happening around, it's hard for me to date because it's back when I still had the store, like. It was Secret Invasion, that time period when it was event after event after event after event after event. Just to give you an idea, War of the Realms, the recent,
most recent one.
Most recent. Its first initial solicitation had 17 different covers, and they added another 8 different covers. after it was sold, and all of that was on a $6 comic. So meaning if a customer wanted 25 copies of that one book, if they wanted to have all the covers,
same issue with all the covers,
$150 minimum to get that get all the covers. The variant cover boom, me and Steve used to have a big argument on this too. Putting a variant cover on there is a sure way of getting bigger sales, but we also have to understand too, that doesn't mean bigger sales to the comic shop. That means bigger sales to Diamond.
Yeah.
The comic book shop, the brick and mortar store, has to decide whether or not
to invest in that.
Invest in getting. So, for instance, for those that don't know, also that are listening, a variant cover could be like 1 in 3 covers will be a variant, 1 in 50, 1 in 250, 1 in 1,000. So you have to order 1,000 copies to get that one book. Now that one book.
See, I wasn't aware of that either. I thought you could just order the variant.
No,
that's
some.
news to me.
Well, they're okay. So you can some, but that's not a true variant. That's a direct solicitation. So that's a 1-for-1. But a variant, a true variant that gets very valuable is it's because it's 1 in every 100, every 1,000.
And it's always like a different artist from a whole different book.
Yeah,
usually.
but some people do. If there's a 1 in 1,000, they will order the 1,000.
Yeah.
And so there's some stores. So now now what if it's a turd?
Yeah.
Now yes, think about do the math on it. They pay roughly if you're ordering that kind of quantity, there's a good chance you have the 55%. It might be up to 60 now, but 55% used to be the top discount for Diamond gave to its value. So I'm paying if it's a $1 book, I pay 45 cents for it.
Yep.
So if I have to buy 1,000 of those to get that one book that I can sell for $500, I have to sell that book for $500 just to recoup my original.
Yeah.
I'm still not making a profit.
Yeah.
Still not.
No.
So I still have to sell the majority of those. And if I don't sell those, they're going in the quarter bin. They're going in the dollar bin. Sometimes some places used to tread them back in the day. And that's a dumb philosophy. Now, my old partner and I used to argue over this because every time I see him at shows now, he still sets up from time to time. He was at the CaveCon for Josh, his big convention he had. And he had box after box after box after box of nothing but variants. And he's like, yeah, these are my variant comics. Some of them he had $200-$300 on. Some of them he had $100. And I would ask him, I go, how long have you had these books? Well, these are relatively new. I got these this year. I go, are you going to sell them? Oh, man, those are good. I could sell that on eBay all day. Then do it.
Yeah.
Bringing it to a show, lugging it around, it's losing value.
Yeah, it's costing you gas at the very minimum.
And if you have 8 long boxes of variants aren't important anymore.
Yeah.
You should have a shelf of variants. And this has been the case for a long time. You shouldn't have... You shouldn't be able to go to a show and see a guy with 100 long boxes and half of them variants. Therefore, the variant is devalued.
Yeah.
All you're doing is forcing people
it's
to buy.
the market.
And it's inflated sales. That's where my original point was going. If I have to order 1,000 to get that one, I bought 1,001 books.
So Diamond looks good, but the actual comic industry is
He's
drowning.
out all that money. He's out for this book in particular. So that $7 book or $6 book, that's a $3 or $2.85 book for him, or $2.75 book for him. So 1,000 times $2.75. That was my average week when I owned a store. My average week was about $3 to $4 grand in what a book, so almost $12 grand a month in books. Now, if I wanted to get into the variant game, that would exponential. That'd be 10 times larger.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that.
So what you're saying is socialism is the answer.
Give them away.
Give them away.
That's almost the Apple.
I mean, they're basically giving that's the same thing. No, and that's a peek in the window that I never really realized or thought about either. And
there is still a group of people, a massive amount of people that want the variant cover. And I'll admit, I've asked Josh when he had a store for variant covers, mainly because if it was my favorite comic book artist. But I won't go to my local comic shop because I'm not a good enough customer to them to get it. I'm not going to spend the kind of money that makes me privileged. So I have to wait. And if I really, really want that, I have to go to eBay or I have to go to the comic show. But I will go to the comic book show because there's something still pure in going to a comic show, a convention, and finding that gem that you've been looking for all year.
Yeah, and I understand that.
But that does nothing for the brick and mortar either.
Exactly. But just thinking about as a casual fan who reads most of his stuff through trades that I am, like when you follow people on Twitter and stuff, even like comicbookresources.com, and there was a couple other websites we used to go to, and I used to go to, and they'd be like, show me your comic book room or whatever, like, little fan call out and stuff. And everybody's shelf is like yours behind me and like mine at home, and it's all trades. It's not boxes and boxes of comic books. It's trades.
Massive wall of trades. I believe are one of you brought Slackers up earlier. So Slackers has new comics, but to my knowledge, they don't have a real discount subscription for people.
Yeah.
A pull and hold thing.
No, I don't think so.
But they have a big long wall of trade paperbacks.
And I think the draw and the appeal of the pull and hold is never going to go away, but it's never going to be profitable. So we need to come up with something new, some other business model like the digital, and if you really like it, you can immediately order like the print issue of that, like for some sort of I think wasn't Comic Book Resources cutting it, like doing a cut in with like local comic book retailers for a while?
They always have. They've always cut. Well, that goes back to Wizard, Overstreet. All of them call comic shops in areas and say, "Hey, how's this?" That's how they get what's hot, reported sales, and things like that.
But I mean, like the digital stuff, like they would cut in and like kick out. I think they were doing some sort of thing like that where they would kick out like the digital's coming out 2 or 3 weeks later.
Oh yeah,
Bring it in immediately.
You get a free one or whatever with.
Yeah, and like the digital media would kick the local comic book store some money for like releasing it early as opposed to a little. That's the only thing I can think is like maybe you get the print version 2 weeks before you get the digital version. That's
a good way of doing it. I mean that would be better. Maybe a month. Maybe you go even to a month.
I mean, yeah, like if it's the same thing the movie industry does. Like if you want the DVD will come out 2 or 3 weeks before like
digital. Before streaming. Before 2 months before Redbox.
And you get you get the hard copy and you get the digital copy. So you get basically your streaming version as well that you can take anywhere you want. You're just kicking out the money right away for the Blu-ray disc or whatever. But I don't know how long that's even going to last because people now, which is what I wanted to get into, is the oversaturation of like so much stuff to watch.
Well, see, that's
the flip side of the coin.
That's the difference between TV, movies, and comics. Whereas TV, movies content is becoming overwhelming, comic books, at least in the big companies, are scaling back.
Yeah, there's less, even in Image, like there's less risk. There's a lot of your bigger artists, like your Scott Snyders, your Rick Remenders and stuff that are getting to do more risky books 2 or 3 at a time, and there's less smaller artists with fringe stuff that
Image is also creator owned, so they can keep their costs down a little bit.
But that's my point though, is like it is creator owned, but they're taking less risks. They're giving these larger guys 3 and 4 books that they can write. Yeah. And I'm not taking away from those guys. They're talented, and there's a reason they're at the top of the echelon, but it's choking out the smaller guys who are trying to come up, I feel like.
Well, that's two different things. The smaller guys have always had to fight to get their comic books.
And I get that.
But I'd also argue that the independent comic is healthier now than it was even in the heyday.
And that was my point that I wanted to bring up is the independent comic is great in the comic book industry because that's what I generally like. Mm-hmm. I prefer the Image comics because they're usually a self-contained story that is done in 12 issues-ish. And if it's an ongoing series, it's still one book that you can always just pick up.
Yeah. Also, too, it's an interesting time for comic books, and one thing that I don't know how this helps the state of the industry, but it helps definitely sustain the quality writers. Let's use Cullen Bunn. He's a Missouri guy or a local guy, and he's
I don't dig this beer.
He's a friend of Josh Roberts, friend of a bunch of guys we know, and he is as good a writer as you get in terms of
his horror stuff is really good.
And in terms of what he writes, I mean, he has given the keys to a lot of big franchises there at Marvel. He constantly is still putting out GoFundMes and Kickstarters for his own books and trying to find a way of getting them printed. So it's an interesting time to where you can do the Kickstarter. But again, I don't know that helps the industry.
It doesn't.
I
think it helps the individual artist, but it's not helping the comic book.
And that's not a shot at the individual writer and artist. That's more of a shot at the industry that they have to go to that.
I think the point that we've made throughout this, however long we've been blabbering on here, is that the there's no love for the comic book store owner. Is the basic point.
They're the ones that are suffering the most. In a time in the 90s when there was a ton of comic book shops and it was the heyday and stuff, and you could survive by just selling crap. There were some crap books in the 90s.
Oh, yeah. I own a lot of them. If you go back and read the ones that I used to buy as a kid.
No doubt.
Oh, my God.
So those were still good times financially for these comic shops. But unfortunately, the reality of it is for guys like my friend Josh and like... Well, me, for example, too. I unfortunately did not survive the crash in 07, 09, the economy tanking. It's a hard world for those guys. That I tell my wife all the time that if we win one of these $200-300 million lotteries that we never play.
Yeah.
She goes,
it's cool.
She goes, you're going to open it. I said, I'm going to open up a comic shop. And she's like, I don't want to do that. And I go, you know what? I recently thought about this. I would take more the model... I would take a little different than Apotheosis Comics, and I would take a beer sauce shop and add and change it to comics and beer instead of, and have trade paperbacks, have a reading section, have 8 taps, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Things like maybe even have a little podcasting area for other local podcast guys to come in and rent space or something fun.
Yeah. Try
to make it an amalgam. So I got to win a lottery to do that. But that's the only way I do it.
Or this podcast really has to take the fuck off.
Yeah, you guys, i.e., 1 million times more popular than it is now.
So speaking of that, Instagram really helps out the artists. I love following comic book artists on Instagram and stuff, and I like their stuff. I don't really repost anything or anything, but I do like it. But one of the artists that I found on there, he wrote a book called Kings of Nowhere, and it's I'll just give you the rundown. It's a graphic novel taking place in a world where humans turn into animals. Shunned, they learn to strive in the criminal underworld. And the art is spectacular. I know nothing about the book, but he wrote the whole thing on Kickstarter, and he got $50,000, basically just posting his art on Instagram and just page at a time.
There's graphic designers and comic style artists that I've bought their sketchbooks from because of Instagram. I've found them on Instagram. They did a Kickstarter, and I'm like, shit, I'm in. You know,
and stuff like that, and that's cool. But again, it goes back to the basic brick and mortar comic book shop is getting screwed out of this.
It is. They definitely
they're losing it all. Unless they become niche art houses.
It's a sad. It's a reality. I don't know if it's sad or not, but it is a reality. I am interested as a whole in 10 years from now, how many theaters exist in the current business model.
What I disagree with you there is that I think movie theaters will always exist because of things like Marvel films and stuff like that.
Well, I think got places like Alamo Drafthouse and AMC that do these retro movies. I think that's going to be more because I do think you're right.
I think it'll be a niche thing. Yeah, I agree.
The Marvel the tentpole movie also is. By the way, that may be killing small market movies more than anything.
When is the last time you went and saw a comedy in the theater?
Oh, it's been a long time.
Exactly, because it's $15 to see a comedy or $15 to see Captain America fucking punching Nazi through the screen.
I'll give you an example. Last year there was a movie that came
Hydra,
out
not Nazis,
with Jake Gyllenhaal, John C. Reilly, and Joaquin Phoenix called The Sister Brothers. I talked about it on this podcast.
Did you see that in theaters?
No, but it got great reviews.
Yeah.
It looked awesome from the trailer.
But there's no reason to see it in the theater.
Never went to the theater, saw it. Instead, I paid $4 for it on Google Play a couple nights ago, and I fucking loved the movie.
So, same thing, Big Sick was this big movie that everybody loved.
Awesome
and it came out, I have an Amazon Prime subscription, it came out, I would have paid $4 or $5. I
paid $5 on it when it was still for pay, and I loved it.
And it was amazing. I teared up. It was a great movie.
I would have went to the theater to see it, but it just didn't get a lot of screens.
And there's no reason for me to see that in the theater. I get the same amount of enjoyment for that type of movie at home as I do.
And our spouses are also less likely to like everything we take them to, so we're even out more money.
Yeah, exactly. So, I have a 13-year-old son who loves to see comic book movies, and a 10-month-old son who's going to hopefully be right behind him and love them too.
I still do think, though, that the streaming will be more predominant than the theater in the future. And so to tie that to comics, they've been since I got into the comic book as a profession, comic book industry, and i.e. sold at a comic book store in Springfield, Missouri in 92, 2000, God, it's probably been 2002, something like that.
Yeah.
People have been preaching the doom and gloom for comics ever since it bursted in 97, 98.
Yeah.
It's been in decline, they've said. And there is somewhat truth to that, but it still goes. And so one thing we didn't touch on, and let's talk about that now before we wrap up, because we've been near an hour, is there been a decline in quality? There's an argument to be made that the answer is yes and no. The argument to be made is for yes, quality is declining. That's if you look at the big two and the mainstream characters.
Yeah.
And that's got a lot to do with the pressures that come in making the comics be more akin to the movies.
Yeah.
And maybe more like
I feel it, yeah.
Like immediate sales, so you got to keep these big train rolling, events rolling. Yes, so the quality is declining. There's no way around it.
Yeah, you're right. It's basically like Marvel and, well, not so much on the DC scale because they can't get their shit together, but Marvel's basically writing for the next phase 4 of the movies or whatever, as opposed to writing whatever they want.
And you do, though, see, there is some outliers. We just talked about Batman. Batman's always been a strong book for DC. There was a time where Green Lantern was really leading the charge.
Yeah.
But you'll always find a book like that. You'll find a book like Mr. Miracle, whether we dug it or not.
Had we done more research and been better prepared for this, I'd be curious if Shazam comic, like, because that movie was a huge success.
I don't think it really did much for the comic.
I would be curious, though.
Think about this, though. You've had Mr. Miracle.
We should really start planning stuff.
Well, you had Mr. Miracle. That really made a blip on your radar.
Yeah.
There was Scott Snyder's Batman. Yeah. There were some great Marvel books like Vision, things like that. Had Shazam made an impact on you, you would have noticed it.
There'd be a new series out right
You'd have noticed it. You would have looked
It's weird that they hadn't launched a series at the same time.
They probably did. In fact, I think they
did.
Know. But that goes to show. And Shazam was a character that has never really. It's been written okay here and there.
Yeah.
There was some great. Gosh, I can't even remember who wrote it. Shazam, the Monster Man. There was some good stuff here and there, but it's never been a character that's, since they bought him from Fawcett Comics years and years ago. It's never been a big book.
Yeah,
there's been some blips where it's good, mainly in other people's books.
But
like
he's basically Superman light.
Well, he's Superman magic.
Yeah,
and but never was a big book. But he made a great movie. Yeah. Made a very entertaining movie.
Yeah. So. Have you wrapped up everything that you were talking
No,
about?
I was going to say, but where the no in the decline of comic books is something you brought up with Image. Image is a company that is drastically different from the days Rob Liefeld left and created it with Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson and all those guys, and Jim Lee. And it's not the big comic book company that it was trying to compete with the big guys. Instead, what it is, it's a company that creates books like Saga and Walking Dead and the most kind of fairly recently last year wrapped up Invincible, and it even birthed Powers, which is later moved to Marvel. Yeah. And I'd like to know if Powers was going to gravitate over to DC at some point soon.
And switching it back to the movie aspect of this, and where they're like, there's nothing new anymore, and they just keep rehashing the same stuff. I beg to differ that if they would just borrow from things like Image Comics, like East to West or Black Science or any of stuff like that.
And I think that's where Prestige TV comes in. Maybe,
that is my thing. Is I think that TV is not as good of a story arc or story continuation as a comic book is. And I think a movie does a better job of limiting the story and cutting out all the fluff.
I don't know that that's...
All right, let me ask you this.
Umbrella Academy.
Did you watch the series?
Yes.
Did you love it?
Yes.
I thought it was okay at best.
I really enjoyed it.
I didn't. Did you watch Deadly Class?
Yeah, for the beginning, but it
fell off because it was okay at best.
It might have been a good... I think to say that, you're painting with a pretty broad brush there.
I disagree. Now, because Jessica Jones, spectacular comic. I thought it was a very good, solid series. I think my argument, I guess I'm negating myself here because Netflix is kind of a...
Yeah, I mean, like I said...
They cut shit off for no reason.
The point is, or the argument against that is if you make a really good movie or you make a really good TV show, they're great no matter what.
See, no. But what my point is, if you take something like East to West or Black Science, or if you even take Deadly Class and you just take like the highlights,
I could see Deadly Class could be a movie.
Yeah, if you take the highlights, like and it could be a trilogy, or whatnot. But if you just take the highlights, you don't need to hit on every aspect of the comic because that shit draws on. I felt like Umbrella Academy. I feel like what fails in the TV series and what works in comics is you're allowed an aspect of shit happen in between panels in a comic. And they have to fill that in the TV show. And they have to fill in 8 episodes. And shit gets kind of boring because they don't have... These characters aren't fleshed out enough in the comics, especially in something like Umbrella Academy.
Oh, I thought they were fleshed out great in the comics.
They are, but in the show, I don't think it did a good job of fleshing them out and making them interesting. I thought some of them got kind of boring. Short of, I'm blanking on his name, but the like Ape Boy or whatever was really interesting in the comic. Number one, but he wasn't that interesting in the show. Number 5 or whatever, who sees dead people.
Oh, yeah.
No, not number 5. He's number 4, I think. Sees dead people. He was the most interesting character in the show, and they spent a bunch of time on other people that don't really fucking matter, at least in the show's aspect, and that stuff kind of bothers me. I think if you do stuff like that, I think my personal opinion is stuff like that's why I think CW does so well with theirs is they use Flash, but they use an expansive history of the Flash, and it is not true to the comic. But
you're looking at a character that's got 70 years worth of stuff.
But then they do stuff with like DC Legends, where there's 50. That's my point. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. You're making my point for me. Is they have 70 years worth of stuff to like borrow and pick and choose, and this newer stuff from Image that they keep trying to throw on TV. I think they would do a better job if they would just make a fun trilogy type movie.
Well, first off, I think you're asking them that they're not going to ever plan for a fun trilogy because that's a gamble. You take guys like Guy Ritchie and tell them you're going to make 6 movies and the first one flops.
They keep giving Ridley Scott alien shit to do.
Yeah, but it always makes money.
It does make money, but it's not good.
Hellboy, the new one, didn't make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it's got as great as a comic as you could get.
You're right, but they also didn't really market it that well.
Well, I think probably because they knew it was kind of a turd going into it.
But have you read The Wild Hunt?
Yeah, I mean, but
it's not the best arc. Like, why would you pick that one to go on? That's what I'm saying. Like, I think that's why Hellboy, the first one, works so well because it was loosely based.
The first one worked so well because it was Guillermo del Toro and it was Ron Perlman and it was a lot of good things going for it.
But they played with the characters. Like, I don't get mad at the fact that like they're bending here and don't break it.
I think it's a pretty hard. I don't buy into your argument that you should make a movie over TV series. I think what I'm saying is you can pick and choose what you.
No, and I agree, but I'm not saying it's black and white.
Yeah.
But what's Remder's Fear Agent?
Yeah.
Tell me, Fear Agent wouldn't be a great movie.
It would. I think East of West would be an awesome HBO series from the people that brought you Westworld.
You're right, in 12 episodes.
Yeah.
It would be really good, and I agree. But I think that, like, Umbrella Academy, I think would have been better as a movie because they literally only had 14 issues to run from.
And you didn't dig it, and that's okay.
I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it.
But it got great reviews, and people loved it. It was a hit. They're filming the second season now.
Yeah, you're right. But then Netflix is going to cancel it for no reason. You'll never fucking know why.
Yeah, but that's Netflix's prerogative.
But that's not going to help the industry, which is back to the point.
Well, none of it helps. None of the TV, none of the movies help the industry.
Which is back to the point. No, I disagree. I think the movies are helping the industry.
That's not true. Sales are down. Even with the inflated trade paperbacks,
I know sales
they're still down.
I think sales are down.
So that means it's hurt.
But I don't know.
It is. In fact, Marvel and DC are publishing less issues now. What they're doing is publishing more issues of each character.
I don't think that's the fault of the movies.
No, but they're not helping. The movies aren't helping.
But
there's not a sustained spike from the movies.
So my argument, I guess, is differently. My argument is different than because everybody always says like, oh, they're just rehashing all the old stuff that we've done before, like Star Wars and this and that.
Yeah.
And But my point is, there's a lot to pull from Image alone, and I'm not even talking about Dark Horse.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about Vertigo, which is going away now, apparently.
Which is state of the industry's decline.
Yeah, and
Vertigo, by the way, has gave us Sandman, Swamp Thing, a great Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
It gave us Preacher. It gave us
Preacher.
so
it gave
many.
us Collider, which was one of my favorite
Yeah,
comics
it gave us
that
so
I
much
forced you to read.
And it's going away.
Yeah, and it's very disappointing.
And that's the sustainability. They have to scale in order to survive.
Yeah, you got to scale down.
They've got to scale down, and sometimes that's making tough decisions where it hurts. But back to what started this conversation is quality down? Yes and no. It's both yes and no.
I don't think quality's down.
I think it is and it isn't. I think it's down among a good amount of mainstream books. But I think it's up when it comes to the independent and the real story-driven books. There's some great stuff. In fact, I do think there's, across the board, there's better stuff than there was in the 90s.
Oh, I agree.
But I also think that across the big guys, there's a lot of crap out there.
No, and I agree. And I think that the problem with the streaming services like Netflix and Hulu and all these guys is a lot of these... Which
I'm not talking TV. I'm talking comic books.
I'm talking TV. When you're talking quality, what I'm saying is like a lot of these guys are writing to, maybe score a possible TV deal out of this type of thing. So
I bet there's some of that. Yeah,
no, I think it's a lot of it because they.
Well, I don't think we can say it's a lot, but there is some of that. There's people that are out there.
There's a lot of Tom King was just posting on there. I can't talk about it, but I've met with a couple studio executives, and that's great, and I'm very happy for him. And these guys deserve the success that they get.
But I would argue that
everybody wants to be the next Rick Remender. Is my point.
But what's he doing in the TV?
He's got the Walking Dead shit going on.
That's not Rick Remender. That's not Rick Remender.
I'm sorry. I'm blanking on his name.
Well, I wasn't blanking until I was about to make fun of you.
Yeah.
But yes, anyway.
What the fuck is his
Robert
name?
Kirkman.
Thank you.
Yeah, see, even that, though. I met Robert Kirkman when Walking Dead became big.
Yeah.
Robert Kirkman was just an everyday guy. I
know.
Well, no, but that's what I'm saying. You're saying there's a lot of guys out there writing. Those aren't the guys that are making it. The guys that are out there writing because they love it are and
I'm not saying they're not writing because they love it. What I'm saying is I think that the movie industry and the TV industry and the streaming industry are skewing the traditional comic book lovers. Like everything's kind of skewed towards maybe this will be a TV show or maybe
I don't know that that's accurate either.
I think it is. I don't know. There's a lot of newer stuff that I
don't think you have a good argument for that because if you look at the amount of quality stuff that you like, how long it's been around before it even became a TV show. Why The Last Man?
But they can't get that off the ground. And it was finished before it ever became a TV show.
Right.
Preacher's the same thing.
Yeah, it was done well before it. So I don't think they were trying to write
The Boys,
that before.
I guess The Boys has
been gone a long time.
Has it been gone a long time?
Yes, it has.
I never read it.
It was pretty good, especially
Deadly
early
Class,
on. Now there is outliers like that. Even that one that we liked, the Chrononauts, that was picked up before it was even released. There are those stories, but I don't think. Put it this way. I don't think there's a lot of guys out there, and I know some comic book writers.
And I'm not knocking the comic book writers because to be honest with you, if I had the talent, I'd be shooting for a fucking TV show.
But I don't think they're writing with the intent of getting it on TV. I think that might be the hope, but that's a different thing.
I think it's watering down the industry. Then I think it's watering down.
I don't know
creativity though a little bit.
How?
Because you get like. I feel like there's less weird out of the world like goofy shit from Image anymore, as opposed to like more linear stories that are easier to read, like. Stuff like Six Gun Gorilla or...
Well, is that the case, or is it just sales? I mean, they do still
I don't know,
need
and that's an argument to be made.
For instance,
I agree with you.
Saga, Walking Dead, serialized story.
You know what? I'm playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah, I did. Well, the reason I don't agree with you is because... There's so much being written and so little of it getting converted. Yes, there's a lot getting converted.
Yeah, I agree.
And I know comic book writers. I know a couple. We mentioned Jason Hurley. We mentioned Cullen Bunn. We know some of those guys. And I'm sure they would... I don't think they sit down at their typewriter every day to write and say, I want this turned into a TV show. I think it would be awesome.
Here's stuff that So I looked this up, like stuff coming up in development right now. Some of this has already been around, like for example, Lucifer season 5 that's been around. Vagrant Queen, never heard of it. Snowpiercer, watched the movie.
TV series being made.
There's a TV series already being made. They've already got season 2 down. Hawkeye, we know about. Port of Earth, never heard of it. Hit Monkey, that's coming out. That's a Marvel thing. Tiger and Dazzle, Hulu, which Hulu's doing a Ghost Rider and stuff like that. The Blacksmith.
You almost, too, at this point, need to throw
Goldfish,
Marvel and DC out the window because they have their own. I mean, of course they're going to, and that's not.
Well, especially Marvel because they own Hulu now.
And that's not one writer that's like getting that done. You almost have to just go look at the independent ones.
Yeah, like for example, Nameless City, American Flag, Amped, Astro City's not independent.
It's Image. It was Image.
It's Image.
Yeah. Kurt Busiek.
American Jesus is also Image.
Maybe it was, or maybe it was DC's. I can't remember.
Briggs Lane, Brooklyn Animal Control, Concrete, Crosswind.
Concrete was from Dark Horse, but Concrete's been around since 1980 something.
Has it? Okay. Yeah. Well, then, Darkness Visible, Daybreak, which wasn't that a movie?
I thought it was. Yeah, with
Joaquin.
No, not Joaquin. With
Ethan Hawke.
Ethan Hawke, yeah. Well, underrated movie. Not a bad movie.
Yeah, it made me hate him less. Mm-hmm. Disciples, Dr. Mirage, Dreadstar. East to West.
Oh, Dreadstar. That's another old one.
Amazon's doing East to West. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
I didn't read through this whole list.
Again,
There's I'm in the E's.
These are in development, too. They might get stuck in development help, but at least they get money for them.
Yeah, and that's cool, but there's just so much stuff.
There is, but
exhausting.
Some of it, though, is old. Some of it's new. Some of it... I just don't think that...
Like, have you seen a preview for The Boys?
Oh man! In fact, it looks amazing.
Sort of online, like on Twitter, like on little thing. I have not seen like a full-on commercial for.
Oh yeah, it looks awesome. The last trailer, the Red Band trailer.
Really?
I'll show it to you when we're done.
Okay.
It looks awesome.
Yeah, like So I want to watch The Watchmen. Like I'm. Super pumped for that.
The reason that might work is because it's not based on a comic.
Exactly, and that's why that my other argument again is the CW stuff. My son and I watch that CW stuff, and it is.
Yeah, they tie in the big events like Flashpoint and things like that.
And it's very lollipop, safe, whatever stuff, but it's fun. And I would say, like, a personal addiction of mine is iZombie, which was
it's gone
Vertigo
now, right?
comic. I think they're doing one more season, season 5, and then it's wrapping up. I believe iZombie was Vertigo, and I haven't read the comic, but watching the show, I'm gonna go back and read the comic.
Yeah,
when it's done, because I'm genuinely curious.
Comic book before it was a movie, John Wick.
Yeah.
Comic book before it was a movie, Matrix.
And then if you want to flip side it, Buffy survived for another 3 or 4 seasons.
As well as Firefly.
Yeah.
As well as Firefly.
And there's a huge fan base, and there's people that still get into it, and that's what's amazing about
I consider myself a brown coat. If there's one sci-fi property out there that I am a diehard fan of, it's Firefly.
I never read the comics, but I loved the show, and I very much loved the movie.
Yeah, I loved the comics too.
Honestly, and if I'm being honest, I watched the movie before I watched the show.
A lot of people did that. We did that with Josh. We talked about Comic Cave. We made him go see the movie with us, and he's like, "Fine, I'll go back and watch the fucking show."
So, like, just based on the trailer alone for the movie, I was like, I'm all in on this. I remember this being a show. And I'd watched an episode or two, and it was before DVR, and it was on like Sunday nights, and I missed a couple, and
it got foxed. That's what happened.
Yeah, and I was a complete.
That's almost synonymous with getting axed.
Yeah,
it's getting foxed.
So, but it was great.
I tell you what, let's closing thoughts on as the comic book industry. What made us think of it? In order to close, let's also say that since the beginning of this episode, or since what spurred the beginning of this episode, which was Rob Liefeld saying some asinine things, he since has came out on Twitter and said DC's not going anywhere.
Back on Twitter.
Neither is Marvel, and then he said goodbye to Twitter.
Oh, that's right.
You need me? I'm on Instagram.
Yeah.
Which you can just spout off shit on Instagram. So
yeah, you just say whatever you want there.
Yeah, both. I mean, so no, I think in 10 years from now we'll still have a comic book industry.
Me too.
Do I think it needs some overhauling? Yes.
Do I think it needs a corporate...
If you were to ask me where the overhauling needs, I would say 70% of the industry needs to be overhauled starting at Diamond. There needs to be a new...
the top down.
There needs to be a new vehicle in which comics get to the direct market or get to the market. 20% of it needs to be the big two, DC and Marvel. Mainly Marvel's guilty here. And then 10% of it needs to just be a general overlook of the way fans want to see it and everything. People, I mean, Diamond is the biggest monster.
And I think it's an embrace of the technologies. Like, if you're the brick and mortars and the digital distributions need to work together.
Well, or they need to adapt, like Apotheosis Comics, and how there's other beer and comic shops around the world. And we're not just saying beer's the key there, but you need to figure it out.
Yeah,
V-Stock throughout the Midwest has figured it out, but they figured it out by adapting more of an entertainment.
Yeah.
I mean, there's ways of doing it. It's tough to just be a comic book store, and that may not change. But, there's still great stuff out there.
Yeah.
But you also brought up, too, this episode was, in fact, sponsored by the Beer Sauce Shop.
It was.
They gave us some beer for it.
They gave us some great beers.
Well, that was one that came from my beer subscription service, which you can get if you're in the St. Charles metro area, which was Standby, Please Stand By, Hoppy Pilsner from Rockwell Beer Company. Damn good beer. I would give this, I don't know what I rated it, but I think I gave it a 3 out of 5. I enjoyed it a lot.
So it's weird because it says Hoppy Pilsner, but then if you go on Untappd, it says it's a Kolsch, and it was very, very solid.
Then there was Name Tag, which is a Rockwell Beer Company with co-collaborated with Four Hands Brewing Company, which is an Indian Pale Ale. It's really juicy, hazy pale ale. I don't know if I've checked into that, but I'd give that almost like a 3 out of 5. I enjoyed that. Yeah. And then we ended with, before we're drinking the one we're about to drink, with Space Pope, which is an Indian Pale Ale from the new to our market, Cigar City Brewing Company, which is
to our market. You said new tar.
New to our market, which is Cigar City's. If it was 6 years ago, this would have been the most hyped addition to our market there was. The shyness went off this pig a little bit, but it's still this one was okay. This one's more like
it was all right at best.
And you just poured a beer for us.
Yeah, this is another Four Hands collaboration. It's
Hazy IPA, which are my favorite.
Yeah, Four Hands Scale of the Complexity Hazy IPA.
With
I guess
who?
It's not a collaboration.
Oh.
I thought it was. I'm wrong.
So let's start. You start with the Standby.
Standby, I gave that a solid 3.
Okay.
Because it's a Kolsch Pilsner, maybe. I don't know. It depends on where you're looking. I'm just knocking shit over at this point.
Name Tag?
Name Tag, I gave it 3.5. It's very tasty.
Oh, I liked it. Yeah, I liked it a lot. Space Pope? Space
1.75.
It's a good name. I don't like their cans as much.
No.
Rockwell's cans are where it's at.
Yeah, Rockwell's the new brewery to St. Louis. It's the hip kid in town, and they are killing it on the cans and the merchandise stuff because it all looks very retro 80s-ish.
The next regular episode, we're probably going to have a real episode of the next episode we come out.
Tom may or may not be on.
But the Flop will be here because she shared a good article about the most underrated brewery in every state.
Oh, okay.
So I think that'll be worth talking about.
Do we get a spoiler alert?
There is a St. Louis brewery in there, and it's one of your favorites.
Okay.
Now we're drinking Scale of Complexity from
By Four Hands, one of my favorite breweries in St. Louis.
Hazy IPAs, which are very in. First taste.
It's good. I mean, it's
not my favorite hazy IPA, but I'd give it a 2.75.
Yeah, it's right down the middle, 2.5.
Yeah. All right, well,
it's good. I mean, I would buy a 6-pack of this and not think twice about it.
Thanks to Andrew of the Beer Sauce Shop.
Absolutely.
Thanks to anybody that listened to us rant. I know this was kind of all over the place, and it.
I thought it was kind of fun. Because
I think it was because
we come from different areas and different thought processes. I think and it was fun.
And we were just inspired by Rob Liefeld,
yeah.
Which a lot of people will always say that. Go learn to draw feet. It's a cliche joke, but it's true.
You know what he's good at is pecs.
Yeah, oversized pecs, misproportioned pecs to tiny little heads.
Yeah.
He's much like the character.
Pockets.
He's much like the character Pinhead from the Puppet Master show. And
lots of pockets.
No, pouches.
Pouches. That's it.
Like
Pouches.
I need an ammo belt and a pouch.
Did he ever write Batman?
No, he's drawn some Batman though. Maybe he created the utility belt, the utility backpack. Anything else to close on?
No, that's it.
We're playing our music. We'll come back with a regular episode. Thanks, guys.
Yep. Argument. I hope it's transition.